G'day YouTube, sitting behind me is our latest Signature Series build. Now this bike was based off a CB550 that we've actually done in collaboration with Shannons Insurance. A few months ago, Shannons got in touch, asked us to film the process of a customer coming in, getting a bike with us and following the complete project right up until the test ride. Now in this video, we're going to run you through all the bits and pieces, the custom work that we've done, and give you a few tips and tricks that you might be able to use on your own project. This has got to be one of our best builds to date. I'm absolutely in love with this bike, so obviously I'm excited to run you through it. Enough of the chat, let's get into our next build rundown. I'm Tom and you're in the Purpose Built Moto garage. Let's go. Now in the Shannons series, you'll see us go out and actually hunt for this bike. Scott contacted us, he knew that he wanted to come in here and get a purpose-built motorcycle built for himself, but he wasn't sure what he wanted. I really love these CB550s because they're a well-powered bike. The engines are reliable as long as you do a bit of work to them, and they're pretty rider-friendly. Nearly anyone can jump on a CB550 and have a good time. So once we landed on Scott Wanted and went and found the donor bike, the work began. This thing come in and it was a bit of a wreck. It was a complete bike, but nothing was really in good condition. A big chunk of the work early on in the build was getting that engine freshened up. That's been pulled out and completely rebuilt. Every nut and bolt, all the internals have been gone through, measured, adjusted, replaced, you name it, we've gone through it. So we actually pulled the bottom end off of this thing and found a damaged crank on the CB500 engine. I should probably mention before we get too deep that the chassis here is a CB500, a 1972 model, same with the tank and all the running gear. The engine in it is a later model CB550. And that's because when we pulled the crank off, we found some damage in the bottom end. Luckily, I had a CB550 engine hanging out in the shop for another project that hadn't been bought or used, and we swapped out the motor because it was in a bit better condition. Still though, everything's been gone through. We've got a lot of polished cases on here, a little bit of chrome work. We've upgraded the tappet covers to some nice finned chrome pieces, and then we've also put a set of Mikuni flat slide carburetors on it. The Dynatech ignition that we've fitted on the bottom end too, and some performance coils has really lifted the performance of this bike. Our rider, Scott, is a pretty big dude. I'd say, and don't kill me for this one, Scotty, he's probably around 95 kilos. And you know, this thing chugs along with him, no dramas. Being a small bike, but with the performance work that we've done to it, it's got a fair bit of go to it. Now, you may have noticed on our social media that we've opened up a new wing here at Purpose Built Moto that we're calling Purpose Built Performance. So all of our engine builds now are handled in-house, and we're also doing a lot of external work for guys who are building bikes in their own sheds. Part of the performance upgrades on this CB550, you know, we made it go faster, and now we had to make it stop better. If you've ever ridden one of these bikes, you'll know that the old Honda brakes are really not up to scratch. The fix that we've come up with on this, and we've started doing it on a fair few bikes now, is to weld a new bracket onto our fork lower and upgrade the brake caliper. Now if you want to come over here, we'll show you in detail this caliper upgrade that we've done. Now this is one of the parts that we covered within the series, but we've got a big 10mm flat piece of aluminium there, and we've actually welded it onto the fork lower. Now this fork bottom has been sort of heated up slowly and made sure that when we welded it, nothing warped and we get a nice strong joint. So this caliper here is off the late model Suzuki SV650. It's a twin pot caliper with a lot better stopping power, and then we've just fitted it up to the standard CB550 front brake. And that saves us from trying to make adapters with new disc rotors and all that sort of stuff. We were able to fit the old brake rotor with a new caliper, and then we've also upgraded the master cylinder to an Akasato setup, and this thing stops really, really well. Now staying on the front end, we've got a lot of detail to get through on this one, so it's going to be a long video, but we've got our hand fabricated front fender with some nice mounts, stainless steel, all polished up. Obviously our forks are being completely rebuilt. We've got some new springs in there that we've added a little bit of preload tension to by way of spacers in the top. Got new chrome fork caps, the triple clamps are being painted, new seals, and then we've also got an LED headlight upgrade. So we've upgraded the charging system on the bike as part of our engine rebuild, and then we've also got a new regulator rectifier that runs a lithium battery hidden underneath the swing arm. This runs our LED lighting. So we've got a 5 3/4 inch LED headlight, a set of hollow tip chrome indicators. We've got a Daytona Valona W gauge, which is a speedometer and a tachometer in this single gauge face that also includes your dash lights. All of this was hung off a stainless steel bracket, a single piece that has 2 screws up into the top. So if you wanted to take this entire assembly off, it's 2 bolts in the back and the whole thing can come away and be worked on if need be. I'll flick this gauge on so you guys can see it all lit up nice. If you come in here and a bit of detail about the front end. So we've got a custom Cognito Moto top triple clamp, really nice, clean bit of gear there. We've got some Woodcraft clip-on handlebars that also have like a 2-inch offset. So while they're set low at the moment, if Scott wants to go for a longer ride and he doesn't feel that comfortable with his hands down low, a couple of screws and those can be lifted up quite high. So you'd almost be to the point where you were riding with some riser bars. It makes it really comfortable and really adaptable for any sort of rider. We've used a set of Acasado front brake and front clutch levers, just in a black, and then we've also got some Purpose Built Moto 3-button switches. These are all routed internally and then run back to a black box connection that's under the seat. The leather grips, we hit Jamison up from Timeless Auto Trim once he'd done our seat, wrapped the grips, and we've also put a little bit of the leather detail down on our kickstand here as well. I said kickstand, not Kickstarter, but the Kickstarter, I can't imagine it getting used all that often, so the leather's gonna last pretty well, I'd say. Now when you spend a lot of time building a nice vintage fire-breathing motor, getting back to near new spec or better, it'd be a waste not to put a nice exhaust on it. This is a piece that I hand built myself on the bike. I had the idea and I wanted to make sure that I made it come to life on this project for Scott. What we've done here is utilised a few different radius bends and blended them in as best we can to sort of create one single sweeping curve that goes underneath the bike. So we've got a really loose radius bend on the bottom that sort of tightens up and goes into the head. This has all been back purged, TIG welded and polished back to perfection. And then we've cleaned them thoroughly before the engine was started and made sure we got a nice golden colour on the heat treatment for the first time. Making these things really clean before you start them up stops the steel from sort of getting any imperfections in it and stops it from browning out. So as long as you keep them clean, you know, they're going to stay that colour for a good long time. Now the headers are in a 4x2 configuration that are kept separate on either side and run into a pair of our torpedo mufflers. So the system and the bike is all really symmetrical on this thing, looking from the back, looking from the front. It's sort of hard to pick a difference. I mean, obviously there's small differences, but it looks really, really nice. And having that symmetry on the bike really adds to its charm. Now while I'm crouched down showing you some stuff here, we've fabricated a set of rear set brackets. Now, there are a few aftermarket options available that you can just bolt on for these, but what we found is they put your feet too high for our rider who's a pretty tall guy. Like I mentioned before, we wanted to make sure that while this bike handled well, and you know you have that sort of cafe racer look, you don't want to sacrifice its rideability. So we've made these rear set brackets a little bit lower for Scott so he's comfortable on his ride, he hasn't got his legs crunched up around his ears. And then we've just fabricated some custom linkages to suit. We've used a torque lever here that operates the rear drum brake. We've remade all the linkages that lead towards the rear drum brake. So you've got your brake stay and your brake arm are custom aluminium parts that we've put some chrome fittings on, and everything works as if it was factory. We've just changed everything to make it a little bit further back and a little bit lower for Scott. In the past, when we've built Honda 4s, we've always done a wheel conversion. So what we do, instead of having the skinny 19 up front and the 18 on the rear, we use an 18-18 setup. We make the tyre a little bit wider on the front, so we're running a 110-18 on the front, and then on the rear we run a 130. So both the tyres get a little wider and the front one gets a little smaller. This helps with your sort of sharpness of handling, it lowers the front end a little bit, and it also helps with your braking. So if you want to read up on it, look up why superbikes have 17-inch wheels, and it's because that rotating mass is a lot closer to the center of the wheel and it helps you brake performance. So a little bit of technical info for you guys there. It doesn't affect an old 1972 CB550, but you get better performance out of it. It looks nicer. The rims that we use are super nice, and you fit a wider tire on there too. There's no real downside to the mods that we do on there, so we choose to do it on a lot of the fours that we do. We use a H pattern or Acron style rim, aluminium polished to perfection, and we've also polished the hubs and added a few chrome bits here and there for them as well. Now the rear of this frame has been hooped, and we've Frenched in a nice red LED brake light on the back here. We've used a Purpose Built Moto tail tidy kit, and then that set the standard for the base of our seat and also the removable tail cowl. So sitting under this seat, we've got a brat style seat, so Scott can chuck his wife on the back and go for a little Sunday ride. But I'm imagining most of the time when he's riding around solo, the tail cowl is going to be fitted. That was just a specific request that Scott wanted to make sure if he was spending all this money and making himself a nice bike, his wife got to enjoy it as well. The fabrication work that we've done here has all been smoothed out. It's really seamless stuff, and the frame has actually been smoothed out before it was painted too. So all of this sort of looks like it was almost dipped in plastic. You haven't really got any major visible welds and sort of ugly MIG spatter and stuff that these frames usually come with. It's all really, really clean. The rear suspension has received somewhat of an upgrade. They're just a chrome set of shocks from Japanese bike spares. They're not high performance or anything like that, but they're chrome, they're new, they don't leak, and they do the job for us. You'll see in the Shannons series, we go into Jamison's shop and we spend hours trying to choose a leather. We had the bike pretty much completely painted, and as you can probably tell, matching this strange of a color to a leather color is a little bit of a hard task. So after digging through Jamison's leather pile for hours, we settled on this. This is a tan leather that he's used in a few Singer style Porsche interiors that he's done, and then we've nicked a little bit of the woven leather too. It kept the seat super clean, but added enough detail that it was up to spec with the rest of the work that we've done on this bike. Now on the last few detail pieces that we've got here, I've handmade a little aluminium chain guard there to sort of, give you a bit of a blockage between your foot and that chain. Small, stylish, sort of fits the bill. And then we've also got like these nice polished engine cases. So this fin cover was part that came with the original engine that we used. So that's been finished back because I think it had previously been crashed, so a lot of this was scuffed off. So that was put in the lathe, polished up and refinished back. Sort of had to put like a nice smooth edge on it, come up really nice. And you'll also notice as we're going around this build, a lot of the original bolts and stuff, we've replaced nearly every nut and bolt with like chrome or polished stainless. Now, while we do try to do this on a lot of our builds, doing stuff like that, it sort of adds, easily a couple of $100s to your build. When you're buying specialist fasteners, polishing them, or even re-chroming your old bolts, that sort of detail is stuff that is reserved for guys that they really want to spend that extra money, go the extra mile, and make sure that this bike is absolutely perfect. So we've really tried our hardest to make sure that we deliver that for our client Scott, because that was the expectation, and I hope we've done a good job. So I'll pop this tail off so we can run through a few details, and I'll show you what we're working with under the seat here as well. So this tail cowl, we've actually shaped that in fiberglass. This was built quite a while ago before we've sort of tooled up to do a lot of sheet metal work. So the idea with this was, instead of hiding and sort of trying to mask that it was mounted, I sort of couldn't really think about a way to make it fit properly and stay without having screws. So instead of, like I say, trying to hide that, we've actually sort of dressed it up and made a bit of detail out of it. We've used some polished aluminium plates on either side, sort of shaped up into a teardrop fashion, and they suit pretty well with the nice filigree work that Nathan has done on the paint as well. Now, just put that down there. Our seat, we've got a little pull latch here that pops your seat up, and that comes off. So we've got a seat latch on the back here, and then your Purpose Built Moto black box tucked neatly under the seat. Now, as I mentioned in a lot of our videos, this is our control module that we use to make sure that we can run our super clean switch buttons. That's become a standard on a lot of custom builds. We wanted to make sure that we had a product to cover garage builders that wanted to sort of achieve this finish quality in their own garage. This unit tucks away super nice in a hidden electrics tray under the seat, and we also provide an accessories kit that you can link it all up with as well. So the final piece that I'll run you guys through is a paint job on this bike. It was a really massive part of this build. As you can see, we just haven't sort of painted the tins and the fender. We've also gone with the swing arm and the entire frame as well, all that single color. Nathan and I from Live in Loco mixed it up in his shed one afternoon and we were so happy with it. We decided to just go all out, everything a single color, and it really helped to offset the raw metal finishes, the polished and chrome touches that we've got here, and also the seat color as well. This is like a really vintage car color. It was sort of inspired by one of Nathan's old Buicks that he has at the shop. So we sort of started with the color of his car and then worked with it until we figured out, the exact color for this bike. The white gold leaf filigree that he's done here is all laid down by hand. He hasn't really printed anything out design-wise or templated. It was sketched on the tank and cut out in masking tape. You can see all that stuff in really good detail in the Shannons series over on the Shannons Insurance YouTube channel. If you're interested, I highly recommend it. I'm about to start the CB550 up. You'll hear this thing running and then get hit with a really epic few minutes of ride footage that Brandon and I captured for the project. If you want to see this build in excruciating detail, make sure you head over to the Shannons Dream Bike Build series on their channel. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. As always, subscribe to Purpose Built Moto and we'll see you on the next one. Generally, this is the part where your favorite YouTuber is going to ask you to subscribe to their Patreon. Luckily for you, we're not YouTubers. We're bike builders and parts makers. So if you like the content we create and the bikes we build, or you hate both of those things and just want to grab some gear for your next project, make sure you show your support, jump on our online store and give your bike that Purpose Built Moto touch. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.